They thought it would be just another flight. Until one mistake, one slap, and one man's silence exposed the kind of truth people spend their whole lives running from. What happened in that cabin didn't just change one woman's fate, revealed the hidden power dynamics, the buried prejudices, and the quiet injustices we pretend not to see. This is the moment everything cracked, and nothing was ever the same. The first spark didn't come from a shout or a shove. It came from a flicker at 35,000 feet, where the world below was just a black canvas, and the cabin hummed with weary breaths. The overhead lights trembled as turbulence clawed at the aircraft. It was well past midnight, the hour when patience thins, masks slip, and the smallest irritation can feel like an attack. Most passengers in first class had surrendered to exhaustion, cocooned in blankets, earbuds, and half-dreams. But not the man in seat 1A, Leonard Vail. Impossible to overlook, impossible to ignore. A billionaire whose charisma usually charmed entire boardrooms. But tonight, just like the storm outside, he carried a sharp, crackling edge. His voice rolled over the soft drone of the engines as he sparred with a flight attendant about something as trivial as a cup of coffee. "I'm not asking for a miracle," he said. His tone clipped with quiet superiority. "Just a cup of coffee that isn't scorched. Is that really so hard?" Standing before him was Elise Moreau, the senior stewardess on duty, 40-something, exhausted, running on stale pretzels and sheer discipline. Her polite smile was held together, threads of fraying patience. "I'll bring you a fresh one." "Sir," she said tightly. "Just a moment." Leonard didn't buy it. "You've had plenty of moments," he retorted. "What I haven't had is even average service for what I paid." A few passengers exchanged worried looks. Some pretended not to hear. Others leaned forward ever so slightly, pulled in by the friction building between them. Elise turned away. Muttering a quiet breath, she wished she could swallow back. It wasn't just him. Not tonight. There had been hours of non-stop requests. Blankets, drinks, special meals, pillows, and each one had chipped away at her nerves. Leonard's complaint wasn't the cause of her frustration. It was simply the moment everything inside her tipped. When she returned to him with another cup, he didn't bother to look up. His fingers tapped at his phone, firing off emails like bullets. She placed the cup down gently. Finally, he murmured, loud enough to cut. Something inside her shifted, cracked, tilted. She stood there too long, watching him with a stillness that made nearby passengers perk up, sensing a storm. "You're welcome," she said. Not kindly. Leonard's head lifted. His eyebrow rose. "Excuse me? You heard me." Her voice no longer hid behind professionalism. It carried a tremor, half anger, half exhaustion. Another punch of turbulence hit, rattling the cabin and electrifying the tension already quivering in the air. But Leonard Vail had never been the type to let things slide. And Elise Moreau, the woman who'd held herself together through years of abuse, condescension, and corporate politeness, wasn't about to bow her head tonight. She retreated toward the galley, bracing her hands on the counter so tightly her knuckles bleached to white. She shut her eyes. She breathed. She tried to pull herself back from the edge, but that edge had followed her from home, from her teenage son, who barely looked at her anymore, from her elderly mother, who kept reminding her of the doctor's appointment she missed again, from overdue bills stacked like accusations on the kitchen counter. Life had become a storm she couldn't outrun, and now even the sky wouldn't give her peace. Meanwhile, Leonard Valfa, man whose face adorned magazines, whose name echoed in boardrooms, sat comfortably in 1A, convinced the world owed him smooth skies and flawless service. His empire, a tech behemoth, born from money and audacity, made him a celebrity of sorts, loved by some, loathed by many. Tonight, he was in no mood to tolerate imperfections, not delays, not turbulence, and certainly not what he deemed insultingly bad coffee. Elise moved back down the aisle, trying to perform her duties, but every step replayed the sound of his voice. Finally, he had said, as if she existed solely to serve him, as if she were furniture with a pulse. She had been trained to stay composed. But tonight's composure felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. When she passed by again, he signaled her with an impatient wave, and because it was her job, she forced a smile and approached. "This coffee is still terrible," he said, thrusting the cup toward her. "Do you not know how to brew it? Or are you doing this on purpose?" The words sliced. Her smile flickered. Pain flashed through her eyes before she buried it. "It's not personal, Mr. Vale," she said quietly. "Let me try again." But he wasn't finished. "Maybe you should consider a different career if coffee is too complicated for you." The air thickened. Passengers froze, pretending not to listen, but unable to look away. Elise felt her face flush. Years of professionalism pressed inside her like a knot. She inhaled deeply, but tonight, breathing through it wasn't enough. She met his gaze, calm, controlled, but with an edge sharper than the turbulence itself. "Anything else I can get you, sir?" she asked. "Or is your evening already ruined?" A smirk slid across his mouth. "You tell me," he replied. "You're the expert at ruining things." Someone in the second row gasped. The cabin had become a pressure cooker. Another violent jolt rocked the plane, sending Elise stumbling. Her heart hammered. She felt weightless, unmoored. Like the floor had dropped out from beneath her. She steadied herself by gripping the edge of Leonard's seat, and he watched hers mug, mused, taking a slow sip of the very coffee she'd just delivered. Something inside hers, something human, tired, bruised, finally snapped. The motion wasn't planned. It wasn't rational. It wasn't even fast. Her hand lifted and came down with a sharp crack. The slap echoed through the cabin, like a gunshot. Leonard's head snapped sideways. His designer sunglasses slid askew. A collective gasp rushed through the first-class cabin. A woman dropped her tablet. A man whispered, "Oh my God," under his breath. Even the engine seemed to hush for a moment, as if the plane itself were stunned. Elise's hand tingled. Her pulse roared in her ears. She froze, horrified at what she had just done. A career built on composure disintegrated in less than a second. Leonard slowly turned back toward her. Her red handprint blazed across his cheek. But his expression remained unreadable, eerie calm, settling over him as the cabin braced for what would come next. Leonard Vale did not react the way anyone expected. Asterisk, he didn't shout. He didn't lunge out of his seat. He didn't even blink. Instead, he merely leaned back, adjusted his crooked sunglasses with eerie calm, and let a slow, deliberate smile stretch across his face. "Interesting choice," he said softly. "You're going to regret that." His tone wasn't angry. It was composed, almost amused. And that made the moment 10 times more unsettling. Elise stumbled backward, breath quivering in her chest. Whispers rippled through first class. Not loud, but sharp like needles of curiosity pricking every ear. The junior attendant peeked from the galley, her eyes wide and frightened as they locked onto Elise's. Elise began, but her voice splintered. She swallowed hard, trying again. "Mr. Vale, I'm so sorry." He lifted his hand, silencing her with a single gesture. "No need," he said quietly. "You've made your point." For a heartbeat she thought he might explode, demand her restraint, call the pilot, insist she be removed or reported. But he didn't. Instead, he stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust from the sleeves of his tailored jacket. His eyes swept over the cabin, observing the passengers like a man surveying a chessboard. 2 minutes, he said. His voice was low, but commanding enough to spread through the cabin. "Give me 2 minutes." And without another word, he walked toward the front. Slipping behind the thick curtains separating first class from the cockpit area, his disappearance left behind a vacuum of cold heaviness that tightened the air. The whispers grew louder, fueled by adrenaline and morbid curiosity. What's he gonna do? Someone murmured, "He's going to get her fired." "For sure," another muttered. Elise couldn't move. Her hands trembled violently at her sides. She wanted to crawl into the galley and disappear, but her legs refused to obey. Her mind replayed the slap over and over, like a nightmare stuck on loop. 2 minutes stretched into what felt like an hour. The turbulence outside had eased. The storm inside hadn't. Asterisk, the phone in the galley rang sharply, slicing through the tension. The junior attendant answered, her face draining of color. "He's asking for the passenger manifest," she whispered. Elise's stomach dropped. The manifest. Why would he need that? Her imagination spiraled. Public humiliation, legal threats, some orchestrated spectacle that would drag everyone into the fallout. Leonard Vale was powerful, influential, and worst of all, calculating. And the quiet ones, the ones who smiled after being slapped, were always the most dangerous. The curtain rustled. Leonard stepped back into the cabin, moving with unsettling calm. He carried a small notebook and penitums he must have retrieved from his brief absence. His expression was unreadable, but his posture radiated confidence, consequence, purpose, intent. Every conversation in the cabin died as he approached his seat, commanding attention with nothing more than his presence. But instead of sitting, he turned to face the rows of passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth but edged with gravity, "I apologize for the disruption you just witnessed." Elise felt her chest tighten. "No, please, no.
Not a speech.
Not this." "But," he continued, "I believe we've stumbled into something important. A moment that reveals who we are, our assumptions, our pressures, our breaking points." The passengers shifted. Unsure whether to nod or recoil, Leonard gestured toward Elise without looking at her. "You all saw a woman responsible for serving us lose control, and I don't blame her. Not completely." His words sliced her open. Humiliation burned across her skin, because what happened here, he said, isn't just about her. It's about the machinery behind her. A system that grinds people down until something inside them cracks. Some passengers nodded. Others looked away, uncomfortable with the mirror being held up to them. Elise's nails dug into her palms. How dare he turn her mistake into a public manifesto? Leonard finally sat, opening the notebook on his lap. "I believe in accountability," he said. "For her, and for myself." The cabin held its breath as his pen scratched across paper. After a moment, he tore out a sheet clean crisp. "Precise this," he announced, holding it up, "is a donation of $5,000 to any nonprofit she chooses." He glanced at Elise for the first time. "To remind myself that even in disrespect I can choose grace." Her breath caught. Was this contrition? Or domination? Before she could decipher it, he wrote again. Another sheet ripped free, and this is another $5,000, going to an organization that supports airline crews. Because clearly, the stress they endure is unimaginable to most of us. Whispers spread astonishment, admiration, suspicion. Nobody could tell whether this was generosity or manipulation wrapped in virtue. Leonard wasn't finished. He tore out one last page, holding it aloft like a prize. "And this is my personal promise. Every passenger in this cabin will receive an $11,000 travel voucher. On me." Gasps erupted. A man in row 3 clapped slow, uncertain. Then more joined. Soft applause grew into a wave of shocked appreciation. Leonard lifted a hand, commanding silence instantly, but he said, "There's one more thing." He stood again, turning fully toward Elise. "Ms. Marrow," he said, "I want to ask you something." Her throat tightened. Her mouth went dry. "Why, yes, Mr. Vale. What do you think pushed you over the edge tonight? Was it me, the turbulence, or something deeper?" The question landed like a stone dropped into a well, heavy, echoing, inescapable. All eyes fixed on her. She wanted to shrink, to vanish, to melt into the floor. But there was no exit. No curtain she could slip behind. No escape from being human. "It's everything," she whispered. "The stress, the workload, feeling invisible. You were just the final straw." Leonard nodded, almost gently. "Thank you," he said, "for being honest, and for the reminder that even the strongest among us are breakable." He extended his hand. Elise hesitated, fear and suspicion warring inside her. Was this peace? Punishment? A performance? Finally, she reached out, her hand trembling as she shook his. He turned to the cabin once more. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "Power isn't money or status. It's how we choose to treat each other. And sometimes, compassion is the strongest force we have." This time. The applause was louder, unrestrained, almost cathartic, but Elise felt no relief, only the eerie sense that the night was far from over. Elise remained motionless, suspended in a haze of disbelief. Everything, the slap, the silence that followed, the billionaire's unnervingly calm response, the donations, the speech felt unreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life, someone else's consequences. But Leonard Vail's words clung to her like static, not the grand gestures, not the theatrics, but the quiet things he said when nobody else was listening, as the aircraft began its gradual descent toward the lights of Rain Harbor City. The atmosphere in first class had transformed completely. What once felt like crackling tension now hummed with something quieter reflection, humility, awe. Passengers who had earlier rolled their eyes at Leonard's arrogance now stole admiring glances at him, whispering about what he said, what he did, how strangely human he seemed beneath all that power. Some jotted things down in notebooks, as if the moment had awakened something inside the man, uncomfortable truth or a long-buried resolve. Meanwhile, Elise sat tucked in the galley, spine against the cold metal wall, knees pulled close as she stared at her hands. The same hands that served meals, buckled infants, calmed panicked passengers, and tonight, snapped under the weight of invisible burdens, she replayed everything in a looping reel. The sting of her palm, the shocked gasps. The billionaire who didn't rise to anger, but to something far more disarming intention. She wasn't sure what she felt. Humbled? Exposed? Ashamed? Or something murkier? A strange sense of being understood. She unfolded the papers he'd passed to her earlier. The first was the donation confirmation to the non-profit she'd hesitantly named. The second, a matching sum to a foundation for airline workers. But it was the third, the note, that stilled her. His handwriting was impossibly neat, measured carefully, controlled. Sometimes chaos is the only thing loud enough to show us what we've been ignoring. Take care of yourself the way you take care of everyone else. The words struck deeper than any applause, deeper than any gasp or gesture. They were personal, unpolished, real. She folded the note with reverence, slipping it into her uniform pocket as though it were something fragile. The wheels touched down with a muted thunder. The aircraft rolled toward the gate. Leonard remained seated, poised, untouched by the storm he'd just walked through. When the seatbelt sign extinguished, he rose with the calm efficiency of a man accustomed to controlling his life. He paused beside her. "No theatrics. No audience. Take care of yourself, Miss Marrow," he said quietly. "You're far stronger than you realize." It wasn't a compliment. It was a truth. Elise nodded, unable to trust her voice. For the first time that night, she felt seen, not as a uniform, not as an employee. As a person. Leonard stepped off the plane and disappeared into the tide of exhausted travelers, swallowed by the airport's fluorescent glow. One by one, the first-class passengers followed. Some offered her soft smiles. Others squeezed her arm in passing. A few whispered small words of encouragement. Relief seeped in slowly, but so did something else. Not hope exactly, but the beginning of it. During final cleanup, Elise moved row by row until she reached seat 1, at the epicenter of everything. There, resting neatly on the armrest, was a business card. Heavy, smooth, minimalistic, his name embossed in silver. She flipped it over on the back. In that same precise handwriting, "If you ever decide to chase the things you've put on hold, reach out. No one should outgrow their dreams alone." She stared at the card, a chill pulling through her. Was this his attempt at redemption? A gesture of genuine kindness? Or an invitation, dangerous, yet liberating to step out of the life she'd been barely holding together. She didn't know, but for the first time in years, she felt like she had choices. Driving home through the muted glow of city lights, she replayed the night again. Not the humiliation, not the sting of the slap or the fear of consequences, but the quiet lessons woven between the chaos. Life was messy. People were flawed. Pressure made even the strongest fracture. But dignity mattered. Compassion mattered. Respect mattered. And choosing grace, especially when grace wasn't deserved, wasn't weakness at all. It was power. Leonard could have destroyed her reputation in minutes. He could have turned the entire cabin against her, demanded retribution, made an example of her. But instead, he'd chosen elevation, perspective, mercy, something rare. Sometimes a person doesn't grow until they break. Sometimes a moment of collapse becomes a turning point. Whether you deliver the mistake or receive it, grace is transformative. Forgiveness is freedom. And rising above anger can reshape lives in ways anger never could. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. How would you respond in a moment like this? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the complexity and the quiet strength hidden within human nature.